Please be seated. The court is now back in session. The floor is given again to Nguyen Chi's defense to put further questions to this witness. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President, and good afternoon to you, Mr. Kung Kim. I would like to proceed with asking you some questions about your commander, Mr. Ung. In your experience, was he a good commander? Did you like him as a commander?
I could not grasp whether he was a good or bad division commander.
Did you interact with Mr. Un yourself?
As I stated earlier, I only interacted with the platoon and the company level, and once in a while I would interact with the battalion level.
So you had no personal interactions with Mr. Un, the division chairman, is that correct?
I never met or spoke to him in person. I did not know him that well.
And you have spoken about Mr. Yim, who was also your superior. Did you interact with him on a regular basis?
As for Jim, who was the commander of a battalion, I was not close to him, but sometimes I saw him when he came to convene a meeting at the company level.
And did you did you appreciate him as a superior during the interactions that you had with him?
During the performance of my duty as a soldier under the leadership of the battalion level, I did not have a personal relationship, but I always respected the orders that he issued, and I always fulfilled those orders.
And would you say he was a strict superior, or was he more lenient when he was in charge of you?
From what I knew, and based on my experience, Jim was a firm person and always adhered to instructions. He strictly conveyed the message from his upper superior to his subordinates.
And in the structure of your company, was there anyone between you and Jim, someone that was superior to you but inferior to Jim?
I did not know who was his deputy commander. Red was the company commander, and he used to come to meet with us at the platoon level. And yes, I met and knew this person quite well.
I would like to read to you an excerpt from a book by Philip Short. The book is called The History of a Nightmare, and the document number is E3/9, and the English ERN of the part that I will be reading is 00396489, and the French ERN is 00639818. And I will quote the book. Unlike orthodox communist states, where decision-making is highly centralized and implementation is in theory monolithic, Khmer Rouge Cambodia was unruly. That combination of attributes would prove one of the most enduring features of Paul's.
President, Council, could you please wait? I think there is a technical problem in relation to the reference number of the document that you provided. President, I'd like to give the floor to Judge Lavange to explain some technical issue to the defense counsel for Noon Chia regarding using the quote from document E3/9 in putting question to this witness. The chamber previously observed this kind of issue and already ruled on that. Judge Lavenge, you may proceed.
Oui. Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Although the situation is not exactly the same, the Chamber would like to recall that last week, during the documents presentation session, it pointed out that it was not appropriate to present documents written by a witness or an expert who would be called to testify. So to read an excerpt from a book written by someone who is going to appear subsequently is not appropriate. However, the defense may use the document and the substance of the document to put questions to the witness, but we should avoid using complete quotations from such documents. There we are. I hope we are clear enough. We are not preventing you from asking questions, but you should do so in an appropriate manner.
Donc peut-être pourriez-vous...
So perhaps you could rephrase your question.
Thank you, Judge Lavergne. This is almost clear, but I would say that 3 immediate questions pop up, and perhaps you could provide some guidance because this will come up more often. One thing is, could you explain the rationale behind this rule? We have an expert. We have Mr. Philip Short, who has written about the Khmer Rouge regime, and whether or not the things that Mr. Short writes are correct. That would be a question for the people that were there at the time, and I would submit that in this case Mr. Kum Kim was present at the time in Phnom Penh. So I don't see the harm in presenting to this witness the theory of Mr. Philip Short. This witness will help to corroborate or disprove that theory, and either way it will bring us closer to the truth because he will be testifying from his own experience. Second question that comes up is, let's say Philip Short comes to testify 1 month from now, and this witness would have appeared 2 months from now. Could I then read this passage to him, and if so, what is the fundamental difference between those 2 situations? Third question, in the past, all parties have been putting documents to witnesses of experts that may be called to testify before your chamber. I know for a fact from recollection that the civil parties did so based on a Ben Kiernan book. At that time, it was still the plan that Mr. Kiernan would be heard. It might still be the plan now. And, of course, writings by Mr. Hedder have been used. So if we could better understand the rationale as to why we could not put findings of an expert to a witness, whether or not that expert has been heard already or not, it would greatly assist us, at least, and I assume we're not the only party that would like to receive some clarification on that issue.
If we could be heard on this, Mr. President, and very briefly, of course we're here to abide by and implement the Chamber's directions. I wanted to put forward the prosecution's submission on perhaps how to deal with the issue of books for your consideration. In principle, provided that there is a an appropriate nexus between specific facts that the witness has testified to or that are within his knowledge, we would not object to a specific passage on those facts being put to a witness in order to elicit his evidence or his comments on the assertions in a book. However, the position here is very different. The passage that my learned friend has been reading from relates to the way in which the Standing Committee's directives were understood and implemented by commanders at the zonal level. Before the break, my learned friend examined the witness extensively in order to elicit evidence that he knew nothing beyond the confines, if you like, of his division. And the witness, in fact, confirmed that he was familiar with matters within his division, but not beyond. In light of that evidence, there's simply no proper basis to put this particular passage to the witness and expect him to be in a position to comment on it. It is purely amounting to expecting the witness to speculate. So it's on that basis that we would object to the use of the document in this instance. But more broadly, I wanted to put our position on the record. If there was a proper and direct nexus between the witness's knowledge and a fact or an assertion in written material, then we would not object to that material being put to the witness.
The defense counsel, you may proceed.
Thank you. I do not want to muddle the issues, but just in response to what the prosecution has just asserted, had I not been cut off, I could have continued to read, and it would have become clear that there is a clear nexus between what is written in this passage and this witness. I will not proceed to read the whole passage, but I will just read the following two sentences. Hence, the welter of conflicting signals during the evacuation of Phnom Penh. What was true of the zones was also true at lower levels. And then he goes on to speak about a battalion commander. So there is a clear nexus to this witness, and I appreciate the prosecution's position that indeed, if there is a nexus, books by experts should be allowed to be put before a witness.
President Judge Lavange, please take the floor.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Chamber notes that the entirety of the quotation that the passage the Defense Counsel wanted to quote has already been quoted before. So the Chamber is of the view that it is preferable to quote extensively analysis made by experts, insofar as the expert has not been heard, and we understand that the expert will be heard. It doesn't appear to be appropriate to ask a witness to confirm the analysis made by an expert or a historian. However, the defense and the other parties have already been directed to ask questions to the witness that are relevant and that hinge on the knowledge of the witness and that have a bearing on the analysis done by an expert. In future, we would hope that our decision would be respected.
Thank you, Judge Lavergne, and that's exactly what I'm trying to do, and I have not read out the entirety of the passage that I would like to read out. There is relevant information missing. And so I am trying to abide by your rules, but again, a rationale would help us in understanding it, and I will make an oral application right now to provide a rationale for not reading quotations by experts other than the fact that it's not appropriate. So I hereby request the trial chamber to provide a rationale for that ruling, and I will proceed now to the next questions, and respecting your ruling that I cannot quote from Philip Short's book. So, if I...
Counsel, please wait. Judge Lavange, please proceed.
Bien, j'espérais avoir été clair, mais...
Very well. I thought I was clear enough, but in principle it appears not to be the case. Let me repeat that quoting the analysis of an expert to lay the foundation for a witness's question is not appropriate, insofar as that analysis has not been confirmed and discussed with the expert, and so we are not in a position to know whether we can rely on it. It would be much preferable to start by laying a foundation to the analysis and eventually question the witness on the facts which form the basis for that analysis. And we'll examine with the expert what is the basis for the analysis. And to start with the result is not a good idea. I think it is clear enough now.
Yes and no, Judge Lavergne, and I do not want to complicate matters, but am I now to understand that we cannot use any analysis by experts in questioning witnesses as long as they not have been heard? So that does away with all the experts that have written anything on the Khmer Rouge. And the second thing is, do I get to question this witness on this topic after Philip Short has testified and has explained his analysis? I don't see any other way.
Écoutez, on vous a dit...
Listen, you have been told that you can put any questions you wish to the witness on factual elements that are the basis of the expert's analysis, as is apparent in the book. However, it is not necessary to quote that analysis as such, unless that expert witness will not be heard by the chamber. We know that Mr. Short will, in principle, be heard.
I will move on because time is short. I do hope that I get allocated some additional time, because to be honest, I'm not sure that it's entirely our fault that things remain unclear. I will quote from your statement to the co-investigating judges, Mr. Kun Kim, and it is found, this passage, on page 00278682 and Khmer ERN 00270164, and the document number is D166/74. And you have stated that there, when you speak about the soldiers that participated in the evacuation of Phnom Penh, I quote, "Some had morals and did not fire. Who did not have morals did fire." End of quote. Is it a fair reflection of your words that whether or not soldiers fired at the people depended on those soldiers themselves?
Response. When we entered Phnom Penh, on the first day when we were approaching Phnom Penh, soldiers were exchanging fires, and people could have already been, were being evacuated or had been evacuated, and the fighting took place when people were still there, and only after the population of city had already been evacuated entirely that we were ordered not to shoot. So at the beginning, I could say that people could not hold the fighting, because we were in the confused situation, and soldiers who were angry, for example, after such fierce fighting, they also fired their guns, and during this time, they were not even punished for fire arbitrarily.
Thank you. And what do you mean with this specific distinction that you make between people that have morals and people that do not have morals? And I will, just for clarity, quote it once more. Some had morals and did not fire, and those who had no morals did fire.
Response. To put it simply, people had different personalities and their morals were different. Some who were engaged in the fighting had been angry already, being engaged in the exchange fire and having experienced the casualties, noted the loss of their colleagues. So they were angry, and some could control their anger, and for that some people even shot at civilians because they were angry and they shot at them.
Thank you. That is a clear answer. And I would have liked to ask you some questions based on Philip Short's theory, which amounts to the theory that what happened in Phnom Penh depended to a large extent on individual commanders. But I will forego those questions, and I will move on to the next topic. And I would like to ask you questions about your period when you were stationed in Phnom Penh. Did you know at the time that you were staying in Phnom Penh that there were troops, Khmer Rouge troops, that came from the East Zone and the Southwest Zone?
Response. When attacking Phnom Penh, I heard that people had to be coming to Phnom Penh through the particular zone, and we could see that hear that the North would be in charge of one particular direction, while the other zone, military zone, would be attacking from the other direction. That's what I heard.
And while you were in Phnom Penh guarding this section that you were guarding, were you aware that there were troops from the other zones in Phnom Penh?
Response. I do not know what happened to the duties carried out by other people from different section, for example, different zone or different sector, and I only knew in my area.
And speaking about that area, you've stated that this was extending north of Wat Phnom. Did the area that you guarded border an area that was occupied or ruled by the East Zone forces?
Response. The area where I stationed was under the control of the North Zone forces, and the only thing I know is that I was tasked with controlling the small area in that compound or complex.
Thank you. To perhaps refresh your memory, I would like to quote from the earlier mentioned statement by Mr. Heng Samrin, document number E3/1568, and Khmer page number 00713968, English ERN 00651892, and the second section I will quote from is on Khmer page number 00713946, and English ERN 00651879. On that first page, Mr. Heng Samrin states, when he speaks about the divisions from his zones, and I quote, "My own, the first that had fought in Phnom Penh, and the second later changed to the 209th. And end of quote. But Heng Samrin here indicates that his division was the first to enter Phnom Penh, or the first that fought in Phnom Penh, at least as far as the East Zone forces are concerned. And then on the second page that I want to quote, Mr. Heng Samrin states, "On 17 April at 9 a.m., I arrived at the Independence Monument. After liberation, there was a division of responsibility among 3 divisions from the East. There was my first division, my younger brother's 2nd division, and Thieu's 3rd division, who fought up to Choi Changvar with Marines." And then we get to the section that might shed light on some issues for you. And I quote, "And after liberation, the responsibility for guarding the big road was divided. From Wat Phnom, right this way along the White Line," unclear Khmer words, "the eastern divisions were on that side, Ta," unclear Khmer words, "on that. Because at that time there was the special zone. A special zone was created with Vorn Vet as secretary and Son Zen as deputy secretary." End of quote. So, Heng Samrin states that the Eastern Zone forces were on one side of a line that extended from Wat Phnom. So that means there must have been, if Mr. Heng Samrin is correct, there must have been Eastern Zone forces at least close to Wat Phnom. Do you remember there being Eastern Zone forces close to Wat Phnom?
Response. In Phnom Penh, when we arrived, indeed the division of responsibility was made, and we had to control each block, and I was in charge of the area to the north of Wat Phnom, but I don't remember having seen any of the forces you indicated in their vicinity.
And during the liberation of Phnom Penh on April 17 and a few days thereafter, do you know what the Eastern Zone armies did when they entered Phnom Penh?
Response. I don't know. Because even in my own division, I do not know what happened between one, for example, regiment to another.
And do you know what happened in Phnom Penh in the area that was controlled by the East Zone armies in the months after the liberation of Phnom Penh?
Response. Because we were in charge of different blocks, and that I did not get well informed concerning the event after the 17th of April, so we belong to the only confined area. For that, we do not know much what happened outside.
Thank you. And is it a fair summary of your testimony that you cannot tell us about anything the Eastern Zone forces did when they entered Phnom Penh, and you cannot tell us anything about what happened in the zone that was controlled by the Eastern Zone forces in the months after the liberation of Phnom Penh? Is that a fair summary of your statement?
Response. Yes, it is. That's what happened during that time. As a soldier, I had to obey the discipline and rule and orders, and I had to be on duty at all time, and I had to remain in the area, and I was not allowed to move about freely.
Thank you for that answer. So you tell us you were not allowed to move about freely. You have told us that you had a low-level position. You have told us this morning that you had to stand guard and that you had no idea what happened in the rest of the city. You stated that you were responsible for guarding a section of small blocks north of Wat Phnom and that you were not allowed to leave that section. And you have also stated that superiors were allowed to move freely. And you have stated that your commander, your division commander, Un, was free to travel at least in the zone that was under the control of Division 310. We spoke about your division commander, Mr. Un, yesterday, or at least the prosecution asked you questions regarding Mr. Un. And I don't want to ask you the obvious, but do you know what happened to him, where he is now?
Response. I do not know what happens to Un because he was arrested at that time, and I only saw him passing by at the location where I was on duty, but I never distributed or disseminated any of the plans from him to other people because I was only in charge of standing guard and protecting the vicinity where I stationed there.
Thank you. And while you were participating in the liberation of Phnom Penh, or the months just after that, did you meet any other division commanders other than Un?
Response. As I already stated, in my capacity as a low-level soldier, I did not meet senior people or leaders of the other sections. For example, I never met with people from the regiment or representing the regiment or battalion. And to be fair, I only been working in the platoon and the company and the meetings, that's all.
Yes, I think it's very clear that your evidence, your testimony is that you had very limited knowledge. I think that you have made that very clear. How long, let me rephrase that question, do you remember in which year you left the Khmer Rouge movement?
Response. It was in 1979 when I left the Khmer Rouge.
So, in those 4 years after the liberation of Phnom Penh in 1975, did you by any chance meet any other division commander that participated in the liberation of Phnom Penh?
Response. When I moved to work at the airport in 1976, I met several division commanders, including Ta Levay, Ta Thuok, and other people who represented Division 502.
And just for our understanding, were those 3 division commanders, all 3 involved in the liberation of Phnom Penh?
Response. At that time, I was engaged in the work of at Kampong Chnang, and these people were in charge of the airfield, and they also talked to us about how they liberated Phnom Penh when they attacked Phnom Penh from the southwest direction.
And do you know what happened to these 3 individuals? Do you know whether they are still alive or not?
Response. In 1976, they still alive. But in 1977, I parted my way with them, and I never knew where they could have been.
And today, do you know whether they are still alive or not? Do you have any information as to their whereabouts?
Response. I only was near them in 1976, and I left them in 1977, so I have never had any information about their whereabouts ever since.
Thank you. Based on your own personal experience with the Khmer Rouge Army and its organization and its command structure, would a division commander, such as Heng Samrin, who arrived in Phnom Penh on April 17, be able to give us more information as to what happened in Phnom Penh during the evacuation of Phnom Penh, at least with regards to what happened in the section for which his division was responsible?
The President, International Co-Prosecutor, you may now proceed.
Your Honours, we would object to this question. The witness shouldn't be asked to speculate what other what information other individuals may be able to give the court. If counsel wishes to make submissions to the court, that's a separate matter, but it's not a question appropriate for this witness.
Mr. President, I'm happy to rephrase. Mr. Witness, based on your own personal experience with the Khmer Rouge Army during the evacuation of Phnom Penh and in the months after, in your submission, who would have a better overview of things that happened in the city during the evacuation and in the months after the evacuation? A simple 16-year-old foot soldier like you, or a division commander?
Response. I'm afraid I don't understand your question. Please repeat it.
I will try to be more specific. You were a 16-year-old soldier that had very limited freedom to move around Phnom Penh. Is that correct?
Response. Yes, it is correct. At that time, I was authorized to guard and to work all days and nights, no time to rest. And we had to be on duty at the area assigned to us every now and then.
And is it correct to state that you only knew about things that happened in your small section that you were guarding, as you mentioned, those small blocks north of Wat Phnom?
The President, witness, could you please hold on, an international co-prosecutor? You may now proceed.
Objection, Your Honours, that the question is entirely repetitive. We've heard it several times. We've even heard counsel summarising the evidence. This is about the fourth time the same question is being asked.
Mr. President, I am trying to be helpful to the witness. He indicated he had trouble understanding the earlier question. I am trying to take him through the steps. I'm willing to move on.
The President, the objection by the co-prosecutor is sustained. The question itself is repetitive, and witness is directed not to respond to a repetitive question.
Thank you. Considering your limited role and knowledge during the evacuation of Phnom Penh and the months after, would you submit that division commanders like Un and like Heng Samrin would have a better overview as to what happened in Phnom Penh in April 1975 and in the months thereafter?
Response. I have no idea whether, or I have no idea about the plans or the knowledge of the leaders, because I only carried out the tasks rendered to us at the location, and I never knew their plan or their knowledge.
Thank you. That is a straightforward and logical answer. Mr. President, I have no further questions. Mr. Sonoruan does not have any further questions, we would like to thank Mr. Kung Kim for coming here and answering our questions, and we wish him a safe trip back home. I do not know for sure whether my colleagues have anything further to add, but the new Chia Defense Team rests.
The President, we would like to now give the floor to counsels for Mr. Ieng Sary to put questions to the witness if they wish to do so. Counsel Ang Udam. Good afternoon, Mr. President. Good afternoon, Your Honors, and very good afternoon to my learned colleagues and everyone in and around the courtroom. And good morning to you, Mr. Kung Kim. I am Ang Udam, and on my right hand side is Mr. Michael Kanawaz, my colleague. For the time being, we do not really have any questions to pose to you, but on behalf of Mr. Ieng Sary, we thank you very much indeed for taking the stand to give you testimony, and we wish you safe travels. The President, thank you. We would like now to proceed to counsels for Mr. Kyu Sampon to put questions to the witness if they would wish to do so.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the counsel for Kyu Sampon, we do not have any question for this witness. Thank you. President, Mr. Kung Kim, the hearing of your testimony has now come to a conclusion and you are now excused. You may return to your residence or wherever you wish to. The chamber is grateful of your valuable time to testify in this courtroom for the last 2 days with patience and to the best of your ability. Your testimony can contribute to ascertaining the truth in this case. We wish you all the best and bon voyage. Court officer, could you assist with the visual unit for the witness to return to his residence or to wherever he wishes to do so? The hearing today is adjourned and we will resume on Monday the 5th of November 2012, and on the 5th of November we will hear the testimony of TCW 690, who will be first questioned by the prosecution, and we will also have a reserve TCCP 89. Security guards, you are instructed to take the two accused Nuon Chea and Kyu Sampon to the detention facility and have them return on Monday the 5th of November 2012 prior to 9 a.m. The court is now adjourned.